want to welcome General Idriss. General Idriss, I'm very grateful for your visit to Brussels today. Let me tell it in another way. You are the face of Syrian military conscience and resistance to the brutality of the Assad regime. I know that your work is very difficult, certainly because of the lack of support of the international community, but I'm hopeful that these meetings yesterday, today and tomorrow in Europe are a turning point, not only because of your military advances, but also because of a growing conscience in Europe and in the international community that this cannot go on any longer. We are witnessing today, I should say, 2 years of brutality of the Assad regime, and tens of thousands of people who are dead, hundreds of thousands of people who are living today in the refugees camps, and in very difficult conditions, mostly without necessary food, without necessary aid, without necessary medication. And one thing that I want to assure you, General, is that this group, the Alliance for Liberal and Democrats for Europe, has from the beginning been at the side of the Syrian people in their struggle. We already more than 1 year ago asked aid for the Syrian opposition. We asked for humanitarian aid that can really reach in the north, in the liberated parts of Syria, what is not the case today. We requested the establishment of safe zones, non-fly zones, yes, in the borders along the Syrian-Turkish and Syrian-Jordanian borders. We requested also to supply arms to the Free Syrian Army. If the international community don't want to take his own responsibility, then I think the only responsibility we have to take is at least that you can defend yourselves as Free Syrian Army. Because let us be frank between us, Russia continues with impunity to arm Assad, and we at the same moment are talking about non-lethal aid. What does it mean when you see what is happening on the ground? So we are all looking forward to hear from you on a number of topics. First of all, the analysis of the developing situation in your country. What are the perspectives for the moment on the ongoing military operations? What are your main expectations that you have towards the international community? And also to hear from you directly what you hope that the international community can do for you. And I think this is a very important meetings that you have in Europe, because I think that could be the start of a turning point also in the attitude of the international community. Myself, I was a few days ago in Washington DC, having contacts also with a number of people, and I see in any way in the attitude of the American administration since the arrival of Mr. Kerry to the State Department a change in their attitude towards the ongoing conflict in Syria. But General, I give you immediately the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, all of you from the Syrian people. And thank you very much to Mr. Guy Verhofstadt for this gracious invitation that gave me the honor and the opportunity to be among you today, to tell you about what is going on in Syria for 2 years. Simply and shortly, the Syrian revolution began peacefully, where young people came out to demonstrate on the streets, demanding freedom and democracy and better job opportunities and better life, and demanding to put an end to the repression among the Syrian people and all the institutions in the country, and to put an end for the dictatorship imposed on the country since more than 40 years. The tyrannical regime faced the demonstrators with armed forces and police units and what we in Syria call shabiha, who began to fire on demonstrators. And the development in the Syrian revolution led to a situation where the regime began to use the armed forces against the citizens and to raid the villages and cities and to arrest the demonstrators and their families and to put them in prison. At that point, it was important to think about protection of the demonstrators. And the groups of armed civilian revolutionary forces began to work on the ground to protect the demonstrators. These groups were built from civilians and from militaries who defected from the army. And these groups in the development formed what we now call the Free Syrian Army. The Free Syrian Army is very well organized now, and we have a structure, and I gave a copy of this structure to Mr. Guy. There are main goals for the Free Syrian Army. The first goal is to fall the regime. And the second goal is to defend the civilians and to defend the country and to stop killing and destroying. We are looking for a new Syria after falling the regime, where freedom and democracy will be as in every European and Western country in the world. We in the Free Syrian Army support freedom for speech for every Syrian citizen, freedom for religion. All the Syrian people will have the same duty and the same responsibilities. We in Syria were living since thousands of years together, Christian and Muslim, and there were no problems between Christian and Muslim, between Alawi, Shia, and Durzi, and other kinds of the people in our society. The regime is that who is responsible for everything what is going on in Syria now. We in the Free Syrian Army, after building the new structure, were promised to have and to get a lot of support. But what we have now is very little, very, very little. And because the regime still have a large number of very powerful weapons and a great amount of ammunition, we still fight against the regime in many sectors, in many regions in our country, without progress. In some regions, we did a lot of progress in the last month. In the western region and in the northern region, we are controlling more than 70% of the area. And around Damascus, the situation is very good now. We have problems in the front around Homs and around Hama and in the coastal region, because the regime has a lot of units of the army there. And in Damascus, the regime knows that Damascus is very important for him, because when he loses Damascus, maybe that will be the end battle of the regime there. We have now more than 100,000 martyrs, more than 100,000 of arrested, and more than 100,000 of missed people. Outside Syria, there are more than 1 million Syrian refugees in the camps in Turkey, in Jordan, and in Lebanon. And inside Syria, there are more than 5 million who must be displaced to more safe areas more times. And for example, my family displaced 4 times, because of the massacres that the regime do against the civilians. These civilians are in most need for support, humanitarian support, and medical support. And they have very little, especially, and excuse me please when I say there is very little support comes from the Western countries. And we look to the Western countries as our brothers in the humanity. And in this very hard situation in Syria, we expect from our friends in the Western country to help us, to be near us, to support us. The people says, and they don't understand why the international community just look at the news in the TVs. They just speak in the media and say that is not good and the regime must stop and must go, Bashar must go, and they don't act, they don't handle. We need to see real action. We need to see support very intensively from the Western country for the civilians who are suffering now because there is no enough food and there is no medicine. We in the Free Syrian Army need, and it is very clearly to say, we need weapons and ammunition to stop killing, to defend ourselves and to defend our citizens. The regime is using very heavy weapons, long-distance artillery, surface-to-surface missiles, Scud missiles against civilians. And it is still using the very powerful Air Force against the Free Syrian Army and against the civilians in the villages and in the cities. We don't like to fight. We don't like fight and blood. We like to stop fighting at once, if it is possible. And we would like to see today that there is negotiation between the regime and the national coalition. But when we don't have enough weapons and when we don't have enough ammunition, the regime in Damascus still feel that he is powerful, and he continues killing, and he continues to shell the villages and the cities, and he refuses the negotiation. And Bashar has told a newspaper last week that he will not go to negotiation. It is very important for us, and we demand from the international community to be with us, to support the Syrian people. Humanitarian support is mostly needed. Medical support is mostly needed. But first of all, and repeatedly, I like to say we need weapons and ammunition to force the regime to stop killing and to stop destroying the country. More than 70% of our country is fully destroyed. We are very sad to tell you that our children, our boys and girls are not going more to the universities, to the schools. They can't go there because the regime targeted the schools, the hospitals, and the infrastructure in the liberated areas. I'm here today, and I'm very happy to be with you. And on behalf of all revolutionary forces on the ground in Syria and all Syrians who are fighting against the regime, to thank you very much, to say to you at the same time that Syrians are peaceful, and they were all time very peaceful. And Syria is a country of a very old civilization. Please be with us. And maybe I like to say to the decision maker in the Western countries, we hope that you take the decision so quickly, not to be late when you take the decision. Maybe when you take the decision to support us, it will be too late. The Russians and the Iranians are supporting the regime very clearly, and they announce everything in the media. But our friends, when they assist us, when they support us, and please excuse me when I say they whisper in my ear, don't tell the others that we support you. I'm here to ask for 3 or 4 things. The first thing is to support us, humanitarian support and medical support, and directly, please, to the liberated areas, not through the regime, because the regime steals 70% of the support and send us only 30%. The support, if it is possible, we need it to the liberated area. Secondly, we need weapons and ammunition, and at first, anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to be able to stop killing and destruction. Thirdly, I like you to give more protection for Syrian citizens who come to your countries. And this kind of protection can be for a short period of time. When the war ended, they come back home. I hope that I go back to Syria with a promise, with a hope that you will support us, to tell my colleagues, to tell the people in Syria that our brother in humanity in the Western countries will be with us, will support us as soon as possible, very quickly and very intensively. I hope that we can put a very quick end to this war in Syria. I hope to have free Syria, democratic Syria for all Syrians. And I hope that Syrian people in the future will take their role in the march of the humanity to more development and citizen. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General, and for this message in the name of the whole staff of the Free Syrian Army, where you are the chief of this staff of the Free Syrian Army. And if you allow me, I will give the floor to a number of our colleagues so that they can put you some questions, remarks, and maybe we can you can then answer globally to the different questions that have been put to you. And I begin with Hans van Baalen, who is the president of the Liberal International and also a member of our group. Hans.
Thank you, Guy. Again, General, I can only repeat the words of Guy Verhofstadt, we are with you, but we should also deliver. If there would be military supplies to your Free Syrian Army, can you then liberate your country? Is a military offensive possible? And secondly, will the national army, the army of Assad, will it rise against Assad? Because they're killing their own people. This must be very bad for their morale. So first of all, is a military victory possible by you? And will Assad's army rebel against Assad? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marielle de Sarnez, Vice President of the group.
Merci.
Thank you very much. General, we all heard your appeal just now and the 4 points that you're asking for. I think you're very right when it comes to one particular point, and that is that Europe has got to get involved. It's got to get involved more, quite clearly, to try and find a way out of this atrocious conflict. There's one thing that General Thias says, someone that you know. In July in 2012, he said that if chaos leads to the fall of Bashar al-Assad, chaos will reign afterwards. Now, I think these words need to be taken into account. Of course, what you're saying is totally legitimate, but what is the state of affairs of the Free Syrian Army at the moment and the National Coalition? Are you leaving aside any thoughts of revenge, retaliation? Are you concentrating on modernizing things? What are you going to do to include the Alawites or the Christians and to send out signals that they will be safe in a future Syria, having achieved liberty? I know that you know that this is very important as well. It's important for any aid that Europe might give.
Merci beaucoup. Cecilia Wikström.
Thank you very much. And thank you, General, for your very, very moving and encouraging speech. It is today almost impossible, as we all know, for Syrians to enter into the European Union for protection. And some of us have been thinking of one idea to help would be to create a special temporary status for protection for defected soldiers who are in need for protection in Europe. By creating such a temporary status, as was done by the European Union in the 90s after the collapse of Yugoslavia, it would also give a signal to encourage people in the army to actually leave. And I would like to listen to your response to this idea. It's a concrete proposal that something could be done. It will not be a solution, but at least give temporary protection.
Thank you, Cecilia. Marietje Schaak.
Thank you very much. I too want to reiterate this group's commitment to the safety and the well-being of the Syrian people, all of them, and we very much worry that the population is actually being increasingly crushed between the aggressions of the army as well as by extremists. Now, you, General, are a trained man with experience, but you now have formal responsibility over a number of armed but unexperienced men, or not formally trained. Many people allege that the Free Syrian Army is also increasingly becoming extremist and even infiltrated by forces of Al-Qaeda and other extremist fractions. Could you share your thoughts on these allegations? And is there a way for you to prevent violations of human rights or the commitment of crimes against humanity by forces that are formally under your responsibility? It's very difficult in such a chaos and with an untrained army to relay, for example, the laws of armed conflict and the Geneva Convention. So I would be interested in your thoughts on that. And if you could say a little bit more about your political role or your aspirations for a rules-based Syria. Is that your goal? And how do you respond to concerns of minorities and women alike that a period after Assad will crush their rights? And is there a role that you see for yourself in preventing such?
Thank you. Charles Goerens.
Oui, merci, Guy.
Thank you. My question follows on from the previous question. I'd like to focus on the humanitarian aspect. You said, General, that you feel you've been a little bit left in the lurch by the West. You've been abandoned by us. And that you're faced with indifference, a lack of power, impunity, powerlessness. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, the Commissioner has done everything he can to be impartial and help those that need that aid. So I think we have done something. The European Union has provided aid, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what you think about that and what has happened to that aid. And then tying in with something that previous colleagues have said, are you resolved to show now already the fact that you don't want to show any kind of solidarity with those that are carrying out crimes against humanity under the opposition? This is extremely important. We need to shed light on that aspect because as soon as we do that, you're more likely to get more support in those regions that, or in those areas that you feel, as you said, that you've been abandoned in.
Thank you, Guy. General, I was really impressed on your speech. It's really moving, and we understand your aspiration for freedom and democracy. I have a few questions related to the current situation and really close to your speech. You spoke about the huge difference between your army and Assad army related to the armament. And you spoke also that they are supported by Russia or by Iran. In this current situation, you believe that they receive still the armament from these two countries? Second question is related to the situation on the border of Turkey, because we have there a very delicate situation. What are your position on this? Because there was some conflict, some misunderstanding, and the Assad army, and also you are accused to bomb by mistake the Turkish territory. And for the future, how do you see if one foreign intervention succeeds to diminish the regime of Assad? How do you see the situation in Syria? You believe that the country is prepared for organized, free and fair election? It's prepared to have a multi-party system? Or it's only the possibility who exists for the moment to change the regime with the other type of regime, more democratic? So.
Thank you. Niccolo Rinaldi, Vice President of the Group.
Thank you, General, for your remarkable speech. Solidarity for the people of Syria, and also a lot of concern for the human rights abuses of the population in Syria, and also a lot of concern for the weakness of the international community, which is failing to react in an adequate way to the magnitude of this tragedy. Two questions. One is very similar to what my colleague Hans van Balen has already asked you. Do you think that at the end there is a military solution to this conflict, whatever it is in terms of supply of weapons or not? Or do you think that the real solution must be based on some kind of political settlement? The second question is about the balance of powers within the coalitions between the more secular forces and the more secular persons on one side, and the more religious and in some kind fundamentalist visions for Syria's future. And within that kind of balance, what is the perspective for the religious minorities and for the women of Syria?
Thank you. Nathalie Griesbeck.
Oui, merci, Général.
Thank you, General. Thank you for your statement. It was very moving, sketching out the very dramatic situation that your country is facing at the moment. These are very dramatic questions now faced by Europe as well. And there's a political question that I'd like to focus on, namely, what is the role of the PKK today? Are you working together with this organization, which is gaining more and more strength on the Turkish-Syrian border? And another essential question is humanitarian aid. This ties in what previous colleagues have emphasized. Marielle de Sarnez and I went to a camp in Kilis, and then we went to Ratay, and this was before the winter period. And we saw that the aid that had been given was quite substantial, given by the Turkish government to these Syrian refugees. And that was before winter. And of course, this situation has got worse since then. And at the same time, a lot of us supported we asked the Commissioner Ashton, or Baroness Ashton, and other decision makers in Europe to ensure that we need to continue aid. And you said that 30% of the aid, only 30% reaches the beneficiaries. And how can we ensure that that figure is increased? Because obviously the humanitarian aspects are extremely important. We've got to continue to provide this aid, but we need to ensure that the aid gets to who it should get to help them to survive while we're waiting for a political solution. Ola Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Mr. General. I'm here. I heard a comment from one Syrian in the radio the other day, and the question was, why Libya, not Syria? That was a question from the those representatives from the population in Syria. And of course, that is a main question here also. So my question to you, did you meet Mr. Kerry when he was in Europe? Did you meet him, Mr. General? Could you nod if you met him? Did you meet Mr. Kerry? You didn't meet him. So, well, the question is, because Europe can do a lot, of course, we know that. But I think it's essential, as Mr. VERHOFSTADT said, what about the US? What about what's happening in Washington? Do you got any other signals from Washington and the US administration? Because I think that's vital. Is 60,000 people killed during the last 2 years? I think it's so awful that it's still happening and we are not doing anything. We are trying to do a thing, but we are not, in essential things, we are not doing anything. We have in the European Union as called a battle group. Why aren't they there? Try to protect the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ole. General, can I give you the floor to respond to a number of these questions? You can do it in Arab, huh? No problem. Yes. We have translation there for that. So, okay. Go.
طيب. شكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا على هذه الأسئلة.
Thank you for all your questions. I'm very happy to see that you are following very closely events in Syria. That demonstrates how much interest our colleagues in the European Parliament take in the situation on the ground in Syria. And that gives us some optimism, hopefully. First question. Can Syria be liberated? Can we liberate Syria if we have the arms and munitions we need? Will the Syrian army, when that happens, will the Syrian army rise up against Saddam al-Assad? Well, at the moment, very violent clashes are going on against the Assad regime. And for some months now, the regime has been unable to cope with these clashes. Their capabilities are being worn away. We're making real progress in the east and the governorate of Raqqa, which was entirely liberated just a couple of days ago. And a great deal of the east of the country has been liberated, the Rif, and a good part of the Rif of Hadaka is also under our control. Only a few cities are not in our hands, and they have been surrounded by the regime's forces. But we're waiting for some cities to fall in the next few days. And if this happens, then the regime will be completely collapsed in the Hadaka region, and the region will be completely liberated, and the whole of the east. The center of the main city has not yet been liberated, nor has the city of Aleppo. Now, you might wonder why the centers of the cities are still in the regime's hands. Well, we've been trying to avoid clashes and battles in the cities. The regime simply starts destroying everything when we start trying to liberate the city. Once we liberate an area, especially in the cities, that area will be bombed. In Aleppo last week, 10 Scud missiles hit the city, and you know how powerful they are. The regime, I'm sorry about this, but is incapable of stopping the violence. The international community said that the use of bombing raids should not be allowed, and now we have missiles. You know, it's a red line. It was a red line, and yet Assad has crossed it. The only thing he hasn't tried is chemical weapons. Again, he's been told that that's a red line. But I'm very much afraid that the regime will use that type of weapon. If we have the arms and munitions we need, then we can bring the regime down in less than a month. I've already said it. In the Free Syrian Army, and I myself, I feel that I'm responsible for what I say. If we have the weapons we need, I can tell you that the regime will collapse in a month. And I mean what I say. On the Syrian army, will the Syrian army rise up against the regime? I think what will happen is that the army will fall apart. It's difficult for the army to turn against the regime given the power of the intelligence services. There is no stronger intelligence system than Syria's. We have many officers working discreetly. Over the past few months, I've worked in the engineering, the Army Engineering Center in Aleppo. When an officer is suspected of planning to desert, he runs the risk of dying, not just him, his wife, his family, they could all disappear. This is a criminal regime, an unprecedented criminal regime. The army will not rise up against Bashar al-Assad. Most, or if maybe not all, officers are of the same political, or rather the same religious group. 90% of them are Alawites. The other 10% represent all the other communities in Syria. And they're monitored everywhere they go, in their offices, in their homes, in their cars. They are monitored everywhere they go. General Klass. No. General Klass and Ahmad Mustafa too have made statements. The Minister of Defence, as you know what they have said. He was the right arm of al-Assad. But that's not whom I'm talking about. I don't think that he really believes what he's saying. He knows he has no authority in the army, although he's Minister of Defence. So he has a uniform with medals right across his chest. And people ask him, where did you get these medals? And he says that he won those medals for heroic deeds. Our army is not involved in a war, though. This man has simply been there to support the regime. And he continues and he continues to support Assad to this very day. Assad has said, it's me or chaos, it's me or destruction. And his supporters have written on the gates of schools, Bashar or the whole country will be in flames. Bashar or the destruction of the whole country. That's their slogan, and they're actually implementing it. In the liberated areas, we have a plan with the coalition to organise our own police and internal security. We have a council for a free judiciary. We have courts doing their job in the liberated areas. There are public prosecutors. People are arrested. We have a judiciary that is functioning in our liberated areas. We are cooperating with the coalition in order to monitor very carefully these liberated areas. And any crime committed, anyone who commits a crime will be brought before a judge. And I am ready and willing to organise security, to organise a visit by members of parliament to those areas. We have no problems. Don't worry, everything's safe. There is a regime with appropriate authority. There is a judiciary. And I have asked people to set up a government to be able to take action. In Babhawa, Baslan and other places along our borders with Turkey, we are able to operate some crossing points. So we want a government, a political government, not a military government. That's the important thing. In the future, we want the army to stay away from politics. We don't want to allow a general to become the president of the country. We want a country with a multi-party system. We want to organize parliamentary elections, and then 4 years later, another set of parliamentary elections. I would like to see a parliamentary republic with very little power in the hands of the president. We don't simply want to repeat what happened with Bashar. We don't want to have a single person running the whole country, and whoever's running the country will have to be replaced by their appropriately elected successor. We're not looking for revenge. On the third anniversary of the revolution, I will release a communiqué to say that we, as representatives of the Free Syrian Army, will guarantee the safety, the security of people and of property, including all minorities. There is a village, a Christian village, which was bombed. Eskilbi, it was called. It's a Christian village, as I say. And the regime sent tanks against it, and those tanks fired missiles at the other surrounding villages so that they would fire back, and then they could say that the regime is attacking Christians. We, in the Free Syrian Army, we don't draw any distinction between Christians and others. All Syrians are equal as far as we are concerned. When I joined the army, I didn't know that there were other communities. I knew that there were Muslims and Christians, but the hatred has been fomented and spread by Bashar and his supporters. We will not allow the Christians to be harmed. We have always been, we still are, in touch with the leaders of the Christian community. We are willing to send forces, despite the fact that where resources are hardly enough. We are willing to defend minorities, including Christians. And you can believe me when I say this. We have always lived in peace with our Christian brothers and sisters, and we have no wish for revenge. We're against any form of extremism, including extremist forms of Islam. We're against fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism. We're in favor of a moderate Islam. Religion is an affair between God and the individual. Everyone has their own beliefs. There are no intermediaries. It's said that the Prophet Muhammad is a correspondent between us and God. And Christians believe in Jesus. We recognize all prophets. We even have verses of the Quran that speak of Jesus and of the Virgin Mary. Our Christian brothers are Syrians. They have their rights. These are not mere words. Our Christians, friends, are our brothers and have the same rights we have. We'd like to thank our European friends for all the support that you have given us. At the moment, the people of Syria are very sad. When the war in Lebanon broke out in 2006, we received more than 1 million refugees from southern Lebanon. None of them had to go to hotels. All were taken in by Syrian families. When the tragedy occurred in Iraq, we received more than 2 million refugees from there, and we don't complain. But today, we're very sad because Lebanon is pressuring our refugees. The situation of Syrian refugees in Turkey is not bad. Syria has always done a country that's tried to do right. We didn't think the day would come when we needed the help of others. But sadly, we have a criminal regime, and we very much hope to be able to overturn it so that Syria can be a productive country with a peace-loving people. We are perfectly happy to pay you back for the services that you have done for us, and we will not fail to do so.
يمكن أن يعطى للسوريين مدنيين أو عسكريين في الدول الأوروبية الغربية في هذه المحنة.
We are willing to provide all necessary guarantees so that our friends can bring us all the aid we need, or send us all the aid we need. We are grateful to the countries of Europe for granting visas to visit Europe for those who, for various reasons, have applied for them. Moreover, all violations of human rights by certain units of the Free Syrian Army, these are loose cannon, these people. They're not disciplined. They don't have officers providing guidance and orders to them. They're a very small minority indeed. These are not career soldiers. They don't belong to the professional career military. They are conscripts. They are on their national service, and they came and offered us their services. I think you'll be surprised given the situation that we should have the time to train soldiers, to train the people who want to join us, to make them aware of exactly what human rights means and a need to respect human rights. I'm wearing military clothing, and I ask everyone who wears military clothing, who wears a uniform, to keep humanitarian law in mind. They need to have a little manual, a book on the subject, so that everyone, every member of the Free Syrian Army knows how to deal with prisoners, how to deal with enemies. Those are the instructions in these books. You find the instructions that we give to all those who want to join our forces. I won't say that everyone is perfectly familiar with the notion of human rights and what it means and how to deal with prisoners and how to uphold their human rights. But we are determined to ensure that everyone who joins us knows that if a crime has been committed, if human rights have been violated, the person who does so will be brought to justice. All those combatants who join us know this, that if they violate in any way humanitarian law or human rights, that they will be brought to justice. Even officers who give the orders, even the officers who give the orders to kill a prisoner or to ill-treat a prisoner, the officers too are arrested and imprisoned. We do that ourselves. For the time being, we're not able to bring them to justice, to take them before a magistrate. And there's a very simple reason for that. People might say it's not fair, that we're not, it's not a real justice system we have, it's a phony justice system. So we're waiting for liberation, and when it comes, we will take these people before a judge. So that's what's happening with regard to human rights. On the support we get from the United Nations, our friends in Europe obviously are the main contributors through the United Nations. They're the aid we get through the United Nations. It's an excellent support, but please keep it up. Along with my friends Zuhair Tassid of the Council of the Coalition, I'm working closely together so that we can keep the flow of aid, keep the aid coming, aid of all kinds, food aid, medical aid, and so on. It needs to reach us directly, because a lot of that aid, pretty well all of it, in fact, goes to the Syrian Red Crescent, because the international organizations do not recognize the Free Syrian Army as such, but they do recognize that official institution, the Syrian Red Crescent. We know what this aid is. It reaches Damascus, it comes into Damascus airport, and this is what happens. The regime sends its goons to get hold of the aid as soon as it reaches the airport, keep it in the hands of the regime. These are, like I say, goons for the regime. They're the ones who drive the trucks that carry the aid from the United Nations, so that they can distribute it where they want to. We, for our part, very much doubt that that aid really goes to the people it's intended for. So this is what we're asking. This aid should be sent either to one of the coalition parties or to the coalition itself, and the coalition, with all appropriate guarantees, will distribute it to the people it's intended for. I have no doubt that the regime is taking advantage of this and is not giving this aid to the people who need it. There was a question about the situation at the border with Turkey. Now, obviously, there are small areas around there that still are in the hands of the regime, and in order to preserve the security of the civilian population and to prevent them from receiving aid from the Syrian army, we have given very clear instructions to our combatants not to fight against the forces of the regime in those towns and villages along the Turkish border. We have prohibited that. Our instructions were very clear, that we gave to the officers and all combatants, and that is to save the civilian population. We're faced with a dilemma. For more than 40 years, people have said to us, you accept the regime, you accept the family, or, it's a scorched earth policy. So what's the solution? Should it be political or should it be military? The answer is clear. You cannot reform this regime. If that were possible, right from the start of the revolution, we would have known that. The regime would have come up with a proposals for reform. Well, all that we have seen is just exactly what any dictatorship does. It's a pyramid. At the top is the president, who hands out orders to people who owe him everything. He pays their wages. You cannot reform a dictatorship like that. You cannot reform a regime that has a mindset like that. All the institutions of the state, military or otherwise, all of them are headed up by people who are in the pay of Assad, of the regime. Right at the outset of the revolution, some officers suggested that that the regime should allow some peaceful demonstrations by the people so that sooner or later things could get back on an even keel. But the leader of the regime refused that. I think it's simple. The military solution could be very long, take a long time and be very expensive. So what I hope for is your aid, your support, so that we can bring pressure to bear on the Russians, on Russia, so that the Russian Federation will stop supplying aid and support to the regime. They have never given up to now. We have every respect for Russia. It's a great country. So I just wonder how Mr. Sergei Lavrov can become Bashar al-Assad's spokesperson. That's how he's seen. That's how we and a lot of other people see him. So that's what we hope for from you. We hope that you can bring the greatest possible pressure to bear on the Russian Federation so that they put a stop to their support and aid to Bashar al-Assad's regime, so that the president can step down. And then when that happens, we want a regime change. That's all we want, a regime change. You asked about the balance between secular and religious groups, and extremist religious groups in particular. That question is asked of us an awful lot. Let me tell you this. Don't be afraid of the An-Nusra Front. It has very few members indeed. We have 300,000 combatants. 100,000 of them are armed. And that is 80% of all combatants in Syria. There are another 10% who are not affiliated to the Free Syrian Army. They don't belong to us. And that includes An-Nusra. They maybe account for 2 to 3% of all combatants in the field. Across the whole country, they have no more than 5,000, if that. 4,500 of them are Syrian nationals. The others are from other places. We very much hope that they will join us, the ones, our own brothers among these 4,500 people. We hope that they will join us once the regime has fallen, and we're working on that. The foreigners who are in Syria will leave our country at that time, and we want them to go. We'll do everything we can to encourage them to go. We do not want those people to have influence or to bring pressure to bear on our young people and our children. We hope, what we hope for from you is that you can help us with weapons to cut short the time it takes for the regime to fall, to make it as short as possible. The longer this goes on, the more powerful al-Nusra gets. I don't know who al-Nusra is getting help from, but please help us to attack their prestige, to reduce their prestige and their power in the eyes of the people. Now, on human rights, including women's rights, we respect women a great deal. That's part of our Middle Eastern culture. In that culture, women have a very important place. And women will have that place in our Syria, in all the authorities and powers once the country has been liberated. I don't think there'll be any problem with the rights guaranteed for Syrian women. We are absolutely in favor of guaranteeing all women's rights.
Now, what's the role of the PKK? That was one of the questions. That's a Kurdish party, of course, working in Turkey, based in Turkey, but with some implications for Syria. Now, in Syria, we consider our Kurdish brothers to be Syrian brothers, full brothers. But they are mixed with other Syrians in all regions of the country, whether in the north, in Damascus in the east, or whatever. The biggest concentration of the Kurdish population is in the north of the country. What the regime is currently doing is trying to use the PKK against Turkey and against the Free Syrian Army at the same time. They've been providing arms, financial aid, and so on for some time. For our part, we've avoided the problems and provocations sought by the PKK. We don't want any problems today or tomorrow with our Kurdish brothers who are Syrian citizens like any other Syrian citizens. Currently, they haven't got the right to form political parties. They will have the right to do that once the country is liberated. They'll be able to set up the political parties they like. There will be no problem as far as we're concerned. We have no problems with the Kurdish population. We now have 70,000 martyrs. I mean, how can there be so many deaths? How can that be allowed? How did that happen? Well, this number of victims wasn't caused by the battles we've waged against the regime, against the official Syrian army. Before coming here, I was in one of the units in the north of the country, in the Aleppo region, where we lost a lot of fighters. I mean, it's normal for combatants to fall in the field, but 70,000 victims. Well, 80% of them, so 90% are civilians, because the al-Assad regime is fighting the Syrian people. I mean, this is part of the strategy pursued by the regime, and the population as a whole is affected. And may the regime hopes turn against the fighters of the Free Syrian Army. What we're seeking to do So that's what I'm trying to do. I want to have the necessary weapons in order to defend the civilian population and to keep them safe from harm. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for having us here today. I wish you every possible success personally, for your families, for Europe as a whole. I know Europe very well. I studied in Germany actually, and I'm well acquainted with Europeans and the European mentality, which I very much respect. I do hope that one day, following liberation, we'll be able to see you in Damascus.
Thank you very much, General. I think that this very detailed information that you had given, I think that you have responded to every question. It's not always so in this Parliament that that we receive an answer to the questions that we are producing. So thank you very much, because I think that you have answered every in detail question that have been put forward by one of the members of the Parliament. And my hope is that these assurances, this information can also be given in a widespread way in Europe. So that hesitations from the side of the international community and from the side of the European Union can disappear the fastest as possible. So thank you very much, and this concludes the hearing of today. Marietje.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you whether you would agree that we would ask High Representative Ashton for a statement on Syria and a debate next week.
Yeah, we do that next week. I can tell you that there has been a meeting also of the General with the Vice President, and we shall come. We shall have the possibility next week to do that. Yeah, to discuss.
Okay, so we will put it on the agenda of the plenary. Thank you.
Yeah, it shall be on the agenda. So this information can also be used there in that in these meetings. Thank you.